Book 1, read by me, for you. The Shadow and the Star, Part 1. The Messenger's Task. Alden had never seen the world beyond his village. The farthest he had ever traveled was the wheat fields where his father worked. Yet, here he stood, at the edge of the whispering woods, tasked with a journey far greater than himself. The village elders had summoned him at dawn, their faces grim. A darkness was stirring in the land, and Ironhearth, the great dwarven stronghold in the Blackthorn Mountains, needed to be warned. Alden was chosen to carry the message. He was young, quick-footed, and, most importantly, unknown to the enemy. "You must not open this scroll," the head elder warned. "Its words are for dwarven eyes alone." With only a satchel of supplies, a dagger he barely knew how to wield, and the scroll tightly to his belt, Alden took his first steps beyond the world he knew. The road to Ironhearth. The Whispering Woods were named for the voices that danced between the trees. Some said it was just the wind through the ancient branches, but others believed the forest held secrets that would whisper to them to those who dared listen too closely. Alden ignored the murmurs, walking swiftly along the path. The second night, as he camped near a rocky outcrop, he heard something beyond the usual rustling of leaves. A heavy boot crushed twigs nearby. Alden's hand trembled as it hovered over his dagger. A figure stepped into the firelight, a dwarf, broad-shouldered and clad in armor, his braided beard adorned with silver rings. He carried a massive hammer slung over his back. "A lonely traveler on a dangerous road," the dwarf mumbled. "What business takes you to the mountains?" "I carry a message to Ironhearth," Alden said, standing as tall as he could manage. The dwarf studied him for a long moment before grunting. "Then you'll not walk alone. These roads are no longer safe." His name was Durik Ironbraid, a warrior of Ironhearth. He had left the fortress after hearing rumors of the old darkness waking. "Something stirs beneath the mountains," he muttered as they walked the next morning. "Something we thought was buried forever." The journey grew more treacherous as they neared the mountains. Shadows lengthened unnaturally. A river they crossed ran black, its waters thick like oil. At night, Alden swore he heard footsteps pacing beyond the campfire's glow, but no creature revealed itself. 3 days into the journey, they entered the Stone Hollow Pass, a narrow gorge where the wind howled like a living thing. It was there that the enemy struck. Dark figures emerged from the rocks, twisted things humanoid but wrong. Their eyes gleamed like coals and their fingers were tipped with dragged claws. Durik moved like a tempest, his hammer crushing skulls and sending foes sprawling. Alden barely managed to dodge a strike, his dagger flashing clumsily. He had never fought before. His breath came in ragged gasps. Then, from the cliffs above, a deep hum filled the air. A rune-carved boulder glowed with blue light and cracked open, spilling forth a surge of golden fire. The creature shrieked and fled into the darkness. Alden turned in awe to see Durik standing with his hammer raised, its head still glowing from the runes it had awakened. "The enemy knows we are coming," Durik said grimly. "We must move faster." The truth and the warning. By the time they reached the gates of Ironhearth, Alden's legs ached, his hands were blistered, and his heart was heavier than when he had left home. The fortress loomed before them, carved into the mountain itself. Fires burned low in the great halls, and the air was thick with unease. Dwarves, once lively and boastful, now spoke in hushed tones. Brogar, the elder of Ironhearth, broke the seal on Alden's scroll and read the message in silence. His face darkened. "The villagers fear the shadow," Brogar said. "And rightly so. The signs are here, the rivers, the sky darkening before dawn. The old evil is wakening." Alden clenched his fists. He had thought himself merely a messenger, but now he understood his journey had been about more than delivering a scroll. He had walked the road, seen the darkness, faced it, and survived. He was no longer just a boy from a village. That night, as he sat by the fire, Durik joined him. "You'll learn more on the road than some do in a lifetime, the dwarf said. Courage is not born in a battle. It's found in the steps taken despite fear. Alden nodded. He had no magic, no great strength, but he had faced the shadows and had not turned away. Then, a deafening roar shook the very stone beneath them. The ground trembled. Deep within the mountain, something ancient and terrible stirred. The fortress walls quivered as a sound like grinding stone echoed through the halls. Alden turned to Brogar, his throat dry. What was that? The old dwarf's face was ashen. The thing we buried, he whispered. It's awake. Alden's heart pounded as another tremor rocked Ironhearth. Dust fell from the cavern ceiling. Somewhere in the darkness of the deep tunnels, something was rising. His journey was not over. It had only just begun. The Awakening of the Deep. The tremors grew stronger. Dwarves shouted in alarm, rushing to secure the fortress gates. Weapons clanged as warriors donned their armor, preparing for whatever was coming from below. Alden gripped the stone bench, his breath coming fast. He had only just survived his journey here. Was he now expected to fight? Durik Ironbraid was already on his feet, hammer in hand. Boy, get moving! We stand or we fall together! A deafening crack split the cavern floor. The great stone doors leading to the underhalls, the oldest, deepest tunnels of Ironhearth, shuddered as an unseen force pushed against them from the other side. A sound rose from behind the doors, something that made Alden's blood turn to ice. It was a whisper, but it was everywhere at once, crawling along the walls, seeping into the stone itself. It spoke in no language Alden knew, yet somehow he understood its meaning. I've waited long enough. Then the doors exploded inward. A great wave of black mist surged through the opening, curling like living smoke. It wrapped around torches, snuffing them out. The warm glow of the fortress dimmed, replaced by an unnatural cold. And then it stepped through. The creature was tall and skeletal, its body wrapped in tattered black robes that seemed to flicker between solid and shadow. Its fingers were unnaturally long, its face obscured beneath a deep hood. The only thing visible beneath the cowl were two burning white eyes like cold stars in an empty sky. Alden couldn't move. His legs were frozen in place, his mind screaming at him to run. The dwarves, however, had faced darkness before. To arms! Brogar bellowed. Hold the line! Durik let out a battle cry and charged, hammer crackling with runelight. Others followed, axes raised, but the creatures only raised one skeletal hand, and the mist obeyed. The shadows surged forward like a living tide, slamming into the warriors, sending them flying. Alden saw Durik get caught in the blast. His hammer's glow flickered, and he was thrown into a pillar with bone-jarring force. Alden turned to flee, but a voice stopped him. You carry the message. The words slithered through his mind like a cold wind. He turned. The creature was looking at him. His hand shot to his belt. The scroll! It was still there, sealed. But why would the creature care about the message? Unless... Alden looked at Brogar, who was gripping his axe, blood running down his forehead. The elder's expression was grim. The message wasn't just a warning. It was something else. A key, perhaps? A secret? The creature lifted its hand, and Alden felt the air pulling at him, dragging him forward like an unseen force was reeling him in. He fought against it, but his feet slid across the stone floor. A voice, not his own, whispered in his mind, Give it to me. Alden clenched his fists. The fear was still there, but so was something else, a fire burning deep inside him. He was no warrior. He was no sorcerer, but he had come this far. Gritting his teeth, he ripped the scroll from his belt, but instead of handing it over, he did something even he didn't expect. He threw it into the fire. A moment, everything went still. Then, light erupted. The fire, once small and dying, roared to life, turning silver white. It shot up like a beacon cutting through the darkness. The mist screeched, recoiling from the light. The creature let out a terrible, inhuman cry, staggering backward. The scroll was gone, but whatever magic had hidden in its words had been released. Alden stumbled back, shielding his eyes. When he looked again, the creature was retreating. its form unraveling like smoke in the wind. The mist shrank away and the fortress breathed again. The silence that followed was deafening. Durik groaned, pulling himself up. Brogar clutched his axe, staring at the fire, eyes filled with understanding. Alden, chest heaving, turned to the dwarves. What was on that scroll? Brogar exhaled slowly. A name, Alden frowned. A name? The elder nodded. A true name, the name of the thing we buried long ago. His eyes met Alden's, and for the first time the boy saw fear in the ancient warrior's gaze. It is not dead, but it is wounded. Flames flickered, casting long shadow along the walls. The war is only beginning, Alden swallowed. He had been a simple messenger, a boy on a journey, but now he was something else. He was a witness to the return of an ancient evil, and he knew, deep in his bones, that he could never go home again. As the last embers of silver fire dimmed, Alden felt a strange pull in his chest, a knowing. This wasn't over. Brogar turned to him, voice grave. You've seen what few have lived to speak of, boy. The shadow will come looking for you now. Alden clenched his fist. He had never wanted to be part of any of this, but he couldn't ignore the truth. The scroll was gone, but he had read it before casting it into the fire. And deep in his mind, though blurred and half forgotten, he knew the name of the thing that waited in the dark. Durik clapped a heavy hand on his shoulder, his expression unreadable. Seems you've got yourself a choice, lad. Run or stand. Alden exhaled slowly, his heart still pounded, his limbs ached, but when he looked into the fire, he knew his answer. I need to find out what that name means, he said. Brogar studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Then your road leads deeper than you ever planned. Durik grinned, hammer resting against his shoulder. Best not travel alone, eh? The fortress doors rumbled as they slowly pulled shut, sealing away the darkness behind them. But out beyond Ironhearth, the world was vast and waiting, and Alden was no longer just a messenger. He was a seeker of lost names, and names had power. The journey was only beginning.